This is the fifth video in a series of covering the AR and Collections Manager. Previously, we recorded an overview of the various different functions that we were going to train on, and then we talked about the fact that there is a link on Business Central that will show you all of the different shortcuts to the various functions. So the first thing that we did was reviewed the fact that collections representatives have to be entered. Then we went over to debt collection setup to do a quick setup. We'll discuss the in-depth setup and all of the different parameters in the last video. Then we went over to generate and update exceptions routine, which generates the exception list, which is the to-do list, which we just covered. So in the exception list, we see all of the AR transactions that require attention. And this is a screen that allows users to decide which customer they're going to contact and for what reason. So from here, we go into, we'll select a customer, and we go to Exception Manager. So the Exception Manager is the next step. And this shows you detailed information about the account. It has a list of all of the transactions that require attention. It also shows the total open amount. If you click on the fact box pane, you can open the fact box pane and see an aging list for invoices. These are all drillable. If you open this up, you can see the ones that are not yet due. We can also see the ones that are overdue and over 60 days. In the top part of the fact box, we can also see open sales orders and all of the various other different sales transactions. Maybe what you want to do, because there's so much overdue, is you want to block this customer. In which case, from here, you can go over to the customer card and block it. You could also jump over to the ledger entries. For example, in this situation, we have an unapplied credit memo. Maybe after contacting the customer, they say, let's close the fact box. They say, thank you very much for letting us know about the credit. Please apply it to the oldest. So from here, you can go over to the ledger entries and use the built-in application function of applying a credit memo or a payment to an invoice. This also has several other functions. This will generate a customer statement that you can send to your customer. It'll also open up the Business Central credit management screen and also open up the relationship management contacts. These are the contact cards that are in base Business Central. These are not our contact cards, which are something else. We have our own contact area information. But you can open the contact cards up to see what is in the system by itself. Now, there are several other functions that you can do from this screen. If you click on Navigate, and I encourage you to take a look under each one of these because there's a lot of information. Jump to the customer card. Some of them are redundant. Some of them you can access the customer card and ledger entries from here as well as from this customer shortcut. This gives you the Business Central Statistics screen. Here you can generate the standard aging report that you had, which was all you had to work with prior to AR and Collections Manager. Generate customer statements, look at the credit management function. This is the Business Central credit management function. And then you can review the various contacts and comments. Some of them are comments on the customer card and some of them are not. Are the ones that are inside the collection. Remember that this information is only visible to people who are enlisted in the collections rep list. Nobody else can get into this information. So under customer, there's all kinds of shortcuts to other information. On the invoice, we can jump to the posted sales invoice card by putting a cursor on the line that we want to see, and we can reprint it and send it if we want to. Maybe what you want to do is transfer an account from either an invoice from one collections rep to another, or the entire account. Or you can initiate a query, which is why we have the email address in the collections representative setup area. Or maybe you want to delete something. You've gone in and you've negotiated extended terms. The invoice is now no longer overdue, at least for the time being, and you want to delete it as an exception. You can do that from here. Contact event history. This will open up the history, which we're going to cover this in more depth in the next video. So I'm not going to say too much about that. So we go into actions. We can mark it as disputed. So we have a separate video on discussing handling invoices in dispute and resolving disputes. You can also create a new credit memo from here. We will talk about one of the videos. We'll be talking about write-offs, but write-offs are not appropriate if you're going to credit out an entire invoice. So we go into all of these other areas. Go to the invoice, mark as disputed, resolved, jump to the invoice card. This one is the one that will be used most often because this is where you're going to create a contact event, which we'll go into in depth in the next video. But there are a couple interesting things. For example, payment history. Payment history is a display of the customer ledger entries where invoices have been closed, and it displays the invoice date, the due date, the date that the invoice was closed, and when and payments that were made against it, how many payments it took, how many days it took. So there's a lot of information, really good information on payment history prior to contacting the customer. So this is, and down here we have some other information. We have the collections rep. This is the trigger points, which is the information regarding how soon after the invoice is due does something become an exception. We're going to talk about that a little more because here we have a customer-specific due date trigger point. So now the due date trigger point is set globally, which we set up when we did the debt collection setup, but we can go in and we will take a look at that in a later video about going in and setting the various different settings for specific customers different from the global settings, which is what was done here. So we always use the due date, the customer specific due date trigger point, and this is 1 day after the due date of the invoice. And there's also some payment class information, which we looked at briefly when we did the information regarding the generate and update exceptions. So we have a payment class as calculated is that it's poor. So they are chronically late, which you probably knew anyway. Okay, so that is the exception manager. It is a place to research and understand what's happening with the customer and what it is that you've already done and what you're going to want to do when you contact the customer. So thank you very much. We'll move to the next one, which will be about creating contact events.